Hello, small patrons, and welcome to Mr. Dan's Real World. Today, Mr. Dan is going to be talking about hypothermia. Now, I know it's a little strange given that here in Arkansas, we barely see winter at all, but Mr. Dan thought that these tips on what to do if someone does have hypothermia might be useful in the future. So, without further ado, let's get started. Mr. Dan thinks he's gonna shave this off. That's better. Now, small patrons, what exactly is hypothermia? Hypothermia happens when a person's body temperature gets so low, usually below 95 degrees Fahrenheit, they have a reduced circulation of blood around the body. What should you do if you encounter someone with hypothermia? First, you need to look at the symptoms. The common symptoms of hypothermia in adults are drop in body temperature, confusion, memory loss, or unconsciousness, slurred speech, exhaustion or drowsiness, numb hands or feet, and shallow breathing. Some symptoms of hypothermia in infants are bright red and cold skin and a very low energy level. So, the first thing you should do when you encounter someone with hypothermia is call 911. And while you're waiting for medical aid to arrive, follow these guidelines. Mr. Dan wants you to know that he's not a medical professional at all. He just found these guidelines on several blogs and medical sites and is going to pass these tips on. Remember to be gentle. Any movements that are vigorous, excessive, or jarring could trigger a cardiovascular collapse. So, no running, no push-ups, don't even flex. Don't do any of that. The next thing you should do, small patron, is get the person out of the cold. If you can, move the person to a warm, dry area. If you can't get that person out of the cold, you need to shield them from the cold ground and /or the cold wind. Wrap them in a warm, dry blanket or a sleeping bag. Do not rub or massage someone you suspect to have hypothermia. If the person has any kind of wet clothing on, you need to remove them. Someone with severe hypothermia could appear unconscious. If that person has shallow breathing and a very low pulse, you should begin CPR immediately. If you are trained to do CPR, give the person something warm to drink, but nothing caffeinated, and definitely do not give them alcohol. Excuse me, Mr. Dan? Mr. Dan? Yes, Mr. Dan. If Mr. Dan encounters someone he suspects to have hypothermia and does all the guidelines thus far, can Mr. Dan give that person some food? Great question, Mr. Dan. Yes, you can, but it needs to be energy-rich food like chocolate and can be given to them in small but frequent doses. Alright, thanks, Mr. Dan. No problem, Mr. Dan. Another thing you need to do, small patron, while you're treating someone you suspect to have hypothermia, is be persistent. Warming up someone takes time. You can't just stick your best bro in a tauntaun and then expect it to do Jedi flip-flops a few minutes later. Star Wars reference. Stay with that person, keep a weathered eye on their breathing, and frequently make sure that they are warming up. Well, that's it for today, small patrons. Mr. Dan hopes you found this video helpful, even though we live in a state where we only get winter some rando week in the spring. Remember, be righteous, take care of each other, and Mr. Dan will see you later. Snow. Snow. La. La 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 la. Mr. Dan kind of regrets shaving his beard.